The elections. So when my father and I talk, I always get the brain juices to start flowing. And so our discussion ranged from trying to see if everything was okay here in Maryland since the storm, and me checking on him to make sure that everything was okay with him there. And it kind of navigated toward the elections and if I was voting. My sister also sent me a text message earlier about my voter registration card going to her house and that I need to get it and change it so that I can vote from my area. And I don't know why they don't understand this by now. My sister, who is also a Facebook user, maybe not as heavily as I do, or she doesn't follow my series of videos on YouTube. My father, he definitely reads my posts on Facebook because I'm one of 3 friends he has, so he has no choice. But basically we got to this discussion about voting and why I should vote and why there's so many people who had died in order for me to vote. And I'm trying to understand, because I think that the United States, as well as various other governments in the world, are very much imperialist governments that do not represent not even 1/10 of what I believe should happen, especially when we're talking about Africa being having the capacity of improving all of its economics within the next 10 years and being pretty much at the forefront, because African people are developing and resisting. And in knowing that, seeing how the U.S. Africa Command is being pushed by the United States and welcomed by neocolonial governments of Africa, and knowing that this presidency, this regime, has been instrumental in pushing a military agenda in Africa, and not only in Africa, within the United States, within its borders, continues to ignore the problems of Black people here. So while we can have discussions around the LGBT community, and while we can have discussions about, some white woman being called out by Newt Gingrich, and while we can have discussion around certain other things that are not relative to Black people, when it comes to Black people, we are nowhere on the agenda. And I know what people's response is to this. Well, he can't talk about Black people. Well, it's possible that, that if he can't talk about Black people, he shouldn't be talking about every other person, honestly. And not only that, I don't even want to put it on the surface as to what he is and what he talks about, but he represents a government. Obama does, Mitt does. They both represent a government, an institution that is an oppressive factor to Black people in the United States. But not only the United States, because the United States is the purveyor of world democracy. It goes around the world thinking that you need to set up your democracy and you need to do it like this way. And so not only does the vote for a U.S. president have an impact on what's happening in the United States, but it also has an impact on what's happening in the world. And so when you elect a president, you don't elect a president based on what your taxes are going to be. You elect the president that's going to go to places like Africa or the Caribbean or wherever else that there are poor and oppressed people, and inflict some sort of harm and might to bend to their will, and has been doing that since the beginning of the institution of the United States of America and its allies like Europe and the neocolonial governments of Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and East Asia and Asia itself. So this is a world system that is based on the oppression and domination of colonized and oppressed people around the world. And so I really want people to understand that when you vote for presidents, when you vote for people in these high positions, we're voting essentially for the president of the world. This United States, when he was elected, Obama was elected president, it wasn't just that we were celebrating, right? It wasn't just like people who were in the States were celebrating. Everybody around the world celebrated. And you know why they celebrated? They celebrated because they thought that this entity that has ruined their lives for so long is now going to work in their interest. But that's not what we saw, did we? We saw all these people get real upset. Chavez and Castro and all these people were like, oh yeah, great. Then they turned around and basically called Obama out for what he was, what he is. And so I'm not voting. I'm not voting because there's nobody out there that represents my interest. And until that happens, I will not be voting. And to answer my father's question, or to reply to what my father said, there's some people who died in order to allow you to vote. Well, they didn't want me to vote against myself. They didn't want me to vote for something because it's because of color. They wanted me to vote because they wanted something to happen. They wanted something to happen that was going to improve the conditions of African people, improve the conditions of their life. And if nothing that is happening within this government is working to improve the conditions of a historically and systemically oppressed population that includes myself, if it's working against that, then what the hell am I voting for?